welcome back to the ADHD biography. I'm your host, John Clarkson, and on this show, we talk to people that are not just coping, not just surviving, but living with ADHD and thriving. And on this episode, I welcome a very special guest all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. I'm joined on this episode by Tyler Mitchell. Tyler joins me on today's episode, having amassed over 10,000 followers on TikTok by sharing his ADHD hacks, how to create an inclusive workspace for people that are neurodiverse. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and like these videos to help bring more conversations like this to life.
Tyler Mitchell. I live over in the States, Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a strategy consultant by trade. Don't ask me what that means. I have a lot of fun with work, but still can't really tell you what I do for a living, but that's okay. I have a lot of fun with it. As far as like the ADHD side of things, was diagnosed with ADHD a little over 3 years ago. Was researching it for my son, who's 15 at the time, give or take, and a lot of things started lining up that I was like, hey, this sounds a lot like me. And started reaching out to some of my friends I knew were ADHD, and each person I talked to said, "You're just now figuring this out?" And what are you talking about? And so I went, had a formal assessment done, ADHD combined type, and started on medication and and started doing a lot of research once I kind of had that curtain pulled back a little bit, and been trying to refigure out my life ever since then. So I was diagnosed early 40s, and like constantly learning more about myself and what the heck the last 4 decades were really had going on. So I'll pause there because I can just keep talking and talking, but I'll
No,
pause there and
that's absolutely fine. No, it's the biggest thing because obviously, I, I'm going through a diagnosis process at the moment, and I had a similar thing to you in terms of when I realised I was researching it. A friend had told me I've got no kids, so I wasn't I'm not at that stage yet, but yeah, so it was a work colleague that said to me, "You've got ADHD," and I was like, "No." She's like, "I'm actually being serious." I was like, "Oh." So we used to joke around as you do, and I just thought she was joking. And then when I actually looked into it, I was like, it sounds a bit like quite similar to you. It was like, oh my god, this is all making sense. Like it just explains so much. What was the biggest thing for you when you was going through that? What were the clearest signs? Was there any particular sort of traits that you were like kind of clicked in your head and you it was like, oh my god, I do that a lot.
trying to think of what pieces had kind of fell fell together for me. Um, it's hard to say because, well, my wife had come to me several times about our son, and we homeschool our kids, and we had heard early on boys learn better moving around, and so from the get-go, we'd let him pace around and while doing school, and uh, there's a strong homeschool community where we were at, so we're able to adapt learning to whatever the needs were.
Yeah.
And but whenever my wife started bringing things up that were concerning her, I was like, I was just like that. Don't worry, I turned out just fine. He's just being a boy, just being distracted. Because he wasn't hyper. And so usually you just think of ADHD with those like really hyperactive elementary school kids that won't sit still, and you just equate it to that.
Yeah.
And so there's so many of those conversations like, don't worry, I was just like that. I was just like that. And and I can't think of when like which parts started falling into place.
Yeah.
But it because one of the times when I reached out to a friend of mine, and I was still like, can you tell me what the process was to get diagnosed? Because I'm reading these things, and she's one of the ones that said, "You're just now figuring this out." And she was surprised. I was like, "Well, I'm organized, and I don't really forget things. I I'm pretty on top of whatever." And she's like, "You've built systems to compensate for your ADHD." And
Is that just like a
wait,
case of masking?
yes, very much so. Like I inherently knew I could get thrown off my routines and schedules. So wherever I had was able to like have a sense of control of like, hey, I'm going to make sure I do A, then B, then C. And whenever someone new would work with me, I said, hey, here's my system. If you have a better way, I'm willing to adapt to it. But otherwise, just so we're on the same page, here's how we
Yeah.
do things. And um, and I guess that's one of the reasons why I didn't see a lot of those signs because I was constantly in environments I could set those systems up and mask. Because when I first got diagnosed, I thought I was uh, when I was getting the diagnosis, I figured they would say inattentive type because I didn't know that there are different types.
Yeah.
And because I would usually just be quiet and I not fidget around. But when it came back combined type, and I started looking around and realized like, oh, I actually do have a lot of nervous energy. I've just learned to mask. And so when I started learning about using fidgets and other things that can help get some of that energy out, I I started realizing how much I depend on those things.
Just going on your point about the fidgeting, then I fit like I know with myself. Although like I can probably sort of sit still, or maybe like I'm on a swivel chair right now, so I will be doing a lot of
Hmm.
swiveling probably. But like one of my biggest things that I find is like if I have pens like these that have got the unscrewable top, I'm forever unscrewing them and losing them and just different parts of the pen. Um,
Yeah.
do you find yourself doing that as well, or
Yeah, I right now I've got a magnet thing in my hand that I'm to make sure I'm not like bouncing all over the place. I'm over here like swiveling it around, and
yeah, yeah,
it didn't realize I was even doing it until you mentioned the pen. Um, uh, yeah, so like when you start realizing how much when and you learn about masking,
Mm,
and you start to pull back those layers and realize that the times that you weren't able to do some of those stimming activities, like how much anxiety was going on.
mm,
And it was kind of difficult for me for a little bit after I got my diagnosis because I started analyzing like where am I masking? Like what things have I been like putting this facade on with so that way I don't weird people out or look abnormal. It, realizing how many things were really making me anxious, but I would just kind of push it down.
mm,
And I come from a very calm family that we don't react strongly to things. But as the years have gone on and we've talked about things, we also have high anxiety in our family.
mm.
And like when my dad retired from work, he found out he had a stomach ulcer. And but you would have never known he was anxious because he's very calm on the outside.
Yeah, it's that
Uh,
masking again, isn't it?
yeah.
And
So
especially,
that energy is going to come out somehow.
yeah,
You know,
definitely as well. I think with I know for me as well, like and a couple of the people that I spoke to with ADHD, in terms of like emotions as well, you can feel like
mhm.
quite strongly. So when you're frustrated, I know with me, like, I've got kind of a low level, like low tolerance for frustration. So if something annoys me, like it really annoys me, it can just blow up very easily, and it's kind of sometimes hard to keep that down. So, and I don't know if
Mhm.
you've experienced the same, but imagine like obviously when you're masking it, it's
Yeah.
difficult, isn't it?
It is because that's another. area that because I was from a young age just was taught you don't react strongly to things. Th that was ingrained. I mean, I think it's a good attribute to have, but one of the things that would I didn't realize was a tie-in until probably a few months after I was diagnosed, and I started researching more material, but for my lens, I came across an article on rejection sensitivity, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I started crying because when I read about it and what it is, uh, I just got so emotional because there are so many times in my life that despite being calm, there'd be an interaction that I just could not let go. And I would tell my wife on those occasions, like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I know that situation's not a big deal. That that interaction that happened, they probably didn't mean anything by it, and I'm blowing it out of proportion, but I'm losing sleep. I
Yeah.
want to punch the person, and I'm not a violent person. And like, and when I started learning about rejection sensitivity and how that's often a comorbidity with ADHD, it was just like, man, just another thing that it just opened my eyes. Um, that helped me see it's another piece that I'm not broken. That like this is actually there. I'm not the only person who is doing
Is
this.
feeling. Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. And I completely relate to that as well. And I posted something earlier actually about like what do you find the hardest thing with ADHD is? And obviously, I think it was more, or specifically, it was about thinking about the social interactions, like way after, or after you've had them,
Oh
and thinking
man.
about I should have said this and I should have said that. But in the moment, you might not say something because you don't want to. It's a little bit of the people pleasing factor, I think, that kind of comes with that, the masking side, but then also that rejection sensitivity where you don't want to say the wrong thing or you don't want to upset that person. So you don't say what's actually on your mind. And that just stays with you for so long.
Hmm.
I know that, like, for me, that was one of the biggest things. I know when I realized, like, my rejection sensitivity, like, it was, especially as a teenager as well, I really struggled with it. So, um, I think, like, I didn't have my first serious girlfriend until I was like 20 years old because I'd grown up and I was so just so worried about getting rejected by a girl, and not only like how that would make me feel but how I'd look in front of all my friends. And it was just, it seemed like a an obstacle that I couldn't overcome. It was so big, and it just felt like it would be the end of the world if I got that rejection, which again blown it all out of proportion. But
Hmm.
it's a real thing, and realizing that, for like, I'd done that my whole life as well, little, especially interactions with work, when I wanted to maybe challenge, especially challenging upwards, I found very, very difficult in workplace. I don't know how, if you've experienced maybe the same or...
Oh, some of the things that I would talk to people about a good bit after I started on medication. I was really lucky. Medication worked for me. ri- the first round, a lot of people have to try a few things to see what works. And my doctor and I just had to dial in the dosage for me. But when I had my first dose of medication and my brain got quiet, I I was like, I didn't realize that it's not normal to have five different radio stations playing full blast 24/7. And the other thing is, I also didn't realize it wasn't normal to wake up at 2, 3 in the morning and start replaying every embarrassing thing you've done since you're 8 years old.
Yeah.
Like I thought that was a normal thing, just part of growing up and learning and your brain analyzing bad things you did so you don't do it again.
Mhm.
Um, but when those radio stations were brought down to maybe one or two radio stations and the volume turned way down, and I was able to kind of take a step back and realize the kind of thoughts I was having and what they're tied to, and learning about rejection sensitivity and seeing like I'm just replaying
Yeah.
those situations, and it's like, that's not what everybody else does. Oh,
It's saying about medication there. So I know that I've kind of given a lot of thought and thinking about, do I, after my diagnosis, do I want to go down the medication route? Because I think I think a lot of people have a maybe a bit of fear or anxiety that if you take the medication, then you might lose some of the kind of good stuff that comes with ADHD at times. It's like that the hyper focus, the ability to kind of like be really adaptable and in the moment. Um, how's medication been for you? So obviously it helps you focus. Have you found like it does affect you any kind of other way like that, or am I just worrying for no reason?
I, and it's a tough area because everybody's body reacts differently. The same medication that I had started, I had a good friend who started it and had a horrible experience. And fortunately, she was told me about the horrible experiences. Like, go back to your doctor because that's not what's supposed to be happening. And she was just going to like just suck it up and say, well, it didn't work for me. And she ended up trying something that ended up working well for her. But everybody's body is different. The type of medication, like some people need the stimulant, some people need like uh, other avenues. And some people have a lot of problems with addictions that they need to be conscious of
Yeah,
some of the medications that are out there because you have to be really cognizant of its effectiveness and if you're acclimating to it. And so with that caveat, it changed my life. So my occupations before that were pretty physical. I was an X-ray tech for probably 10 years. So I was constantly moving around helping patients, taking the the images, and there's always a new case and different room or situation I was in. And so the creativity side was great because when you have someone who's in pain, but you have to get these specific pictures, you have to get creative, and you have to be really good with people. So like it was a great environment for me. But when I moved into my current occupation, where I was going to be sitting at a desk and solving problems, that's where it really became evident for me because um, I would be given an assignment and I wouldn't know how to start, and I wouldn't know how to get to the point where I could get the clarity of what I needed. So I just watched YouTube videos all day and not about the topic that I was supposed to be uh, working on. This is pre-diagnosis, and that's part of what led me to my diagnosis as well, because I started getting really depressed. I started like freaking out because I'm the breadwinner for my family, and we had moved to another city. Like I'm not going to be able to replace this income, going back to my old job, and like all these things, and I wasn't able to start any of the tasks. The, there's so much stress that I was just shutting down. And is a lot of times with ADHD, a little bit of pressure helps us get started. And
yeah.
that's one of the reasons why we're notorious for waiting until the 11th hour to do a major project because that pressure gets us going.
I saw
But
you
back
shared
to
something recently as
yeah,
well, saying you need pressure to start, but then during it,
yeah,
you take the pressure off a little bit, and
yeah, yeah,
that absolutely rings true. You do just need that little push sometimes at the start, and it's not. and obviously with the stigma around ADHD as well, I think some people think, oh well, you just need to try a little bit harder and just go at it. But there's so
Just
much
focus.
easier said than done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know for me, and going into a role where there's it's not micromanaged, it's not like at every level. As I've been in previous roles, your brain can start to think, well, if I start it this way, is that the right way? So, or do I do it this way, or do it? And you just find yourself going off on so many tangents, like you say, it's quite overwhelming, isn't it? And you
Yeah.
can't actually sometimes you struggle to get started without having that little bit of guidance.
Yeah. So like that brings it back to your original question that I was taking a fun little journey to get
Oh,
around to it.
sorry, yeah.
That that but that pressure to start. So a lot of people that I talk to mention like, well, I'm worried about losing that creativity and like some of that so because some of that chaotic thinking is what,
Mm,
it helps me get to these things. And uh, it it's interesting because when I started taking the medication, I could actually sit down and stay on task. And so I'm still able to take the ingenuity and like the being able to take the pieces from other areas that I've learned about, and I've been able to do fantastic jobs with a lot of the projects that I have at work because I'm able to make connections that a lot of other people aren't. And my medication helps me stay focused on the one task, grabbing the details from the other, but coming back to what is actually supposed to be going on instead of going on tangents all over the place and then coming back saying, oh, sorry, I was busy. I don't have anything to show for it, but I promise you I was really busy
yeah.
through the whole thing. And the other thing is, since we're so interest based, if we're interested in something, we can stay on it for weeks, months, where it's our whole new personality. But when I start on medication, I could sit down and say, okay, this topic is not interesting to me. It's kind of tedious, but I can do it. And I can take a step back if I need to map it out, like figure out how to like get into it. I can do that now. And even if I am still struggling to get on task, I'm conscious of it. And so when I realize, oh, I've pulled up LinkedIn 5 times in the
Mm,
last hour when I keep trying to do this thing,
easily done.
obviously what I'm normally doing to be on task isn't working.
Mm,
And I'll just pull another tool out that I have learned to rely on because like medication helps me and lots of other people, but it's a tool. If you don't learn the other uh like tactics to be productive, you're still going to be unproductive. You're just going to be more conscious of it. And like because being productive is a skill,
yeah.
but the medication will helps
Is
me
it is a little
actually be
late towards
productive.
that. Is there anything that obviously you said about the focus, the medication allows you to be able to focus on a task? Is there still anything that you find that you struggle with, or is there still stuff that you manually kind of do yourself to manage what some may say the downsides to ADHD, especially in a working environment as well?
Yeah, so those systems that I had developed naturally, I still lean on a lot of them. Uh, but I've also seen that uh, the novelty interest-based side of us, it, I've been a lot better about not worrying about finding the perfect system and being okay with switching things up. Because that was another thing that would frustrate me is I'd get this perfect system going, and then a week, maybe a month, maybe a day, I'd be like, well, I'm going to do this other thing. And then I was like, man, I spent all that time developing that system to do this thing and it was working. Now I'm like, oh, I need to switch it up a little bit. And so I have lots of things that I'm able to switch up. Um, while my medication helps, I I've mentioned body doubling before. That's something that is really helpful for me. But it's interesting because I prefer to be alone. I love working from home because even though my family's here, I can close the doors. I'm in my little space and I can focus. And I've tried going back to the office, and there's too many distractions. It
Mm.
overwhelms me. But body doubling uh, has been really helpful because if it has to it's helpful if it's intentional and it's with somebody you trust. So
What is body doubling in simple terms, and how have you found it useful?
yeah. So all it is having another person present just there. Like they don't even have to be like working on the same thing you're working on. They could just be sitting in the same room reading a book, like doing their own tasks. Uh, um, it could be virtual. So an example of that for somebody else, I had a project about a year and a half ago that there's this guy who's crazy smart, really good at his stuff, but he could not meet a deadline to save his life. He would say he was going to be ready, he's going to have the stuff, and it wouldn't be there. And so there's one day I was working with him. I was like, hey, where's this stuff that you said you were going to have? And he's, I'm sorry, I'm ADHD. I'm just all over the place. Oh, cool. I'm so glad you let me know that because we're going to change what we're doing here. I was like, I'm going to start setting up working sessions with you. And so first session we got on, I was like, look, share your screen, however you normally work. If you have headphones in and you're jamming out, like whatever, do your thing. I'm going to be working on my own thing. I was like, but if you have a question, if you need to like think something out, I'm here. Just let me know. But otherwise, do your thing. And he knocked out so much work. We didn't even have to do multiple sessions. Like most of the things that he was behind on, he got done. And and that's just a form of body doubling. When I do some of my social media posts about body doubling, and it's something that people didn't realize what it was, they're having these aha moments of like, that's why I'm on the phone with my sister whenever I'm cleaning the house. And like we get on the phone like every week and we just clean our houses. And are you telling me that's why I'm doing that? Um, so when it comes to work, that's something that's very easy to implement. Like I said, it's best if it's someone that you trust and are comfortable with. My kids, since they understand it, they do it with their friends all the time. If they have a friend that complains about being behind a schoolwork or something, they'll be like, "Hey, let's get on the phone." And it's fun seeing them help their friends implement it that way.
Last time we spoke, I said I'd never heard the phrase body doubling, and then I heard it twice in one day.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, thinking about it, like I know that it's certainly without being aware. Since our last conversation, I've been aware that I've probably done it in the past subconsciously with like co-workers without realizing, especially so typically obviously with ADHD as well, like you say about the like interested in something, we can really focus on that. But there's always a middle bit before the end product. There's always the hardest bit to get through.
Hmm.
And without even realizing it in the past, when I've had those moments, I've either kind of sat in the same room as a coworker or just like spoken about like ideas on what I'm doing or just even just saying what I'm doing just to kind of push me past that part. So it definitely is really helpful.
It,
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
it's huge because, like I said, I prefer to be alone. I prefer to like just sit down and create my workout. And a lot of people, a lot of us are that way. 'Cause- And I think it's also because we realize that we're easily distracted. So that's probably one of those like safety mechanisms of like, hey, if I control my environment unless distracted. But that push through on the difficult part is where it takes a lot of self-awareness to be okay with that,
Yeah.
because there can be a lot of shame when you think, I should be able to just do this. I'm an adult. Like, why do I have to have somebody else like with me to help me get through this thing? Um, but when you realize that it's a tool and other people benefit from it, neurotypical people benefit from that kind. And obviously, not everybody. Some
Yeah.
people, like, it doesn't work for them, but a lot of neurotypical people, it works for them. And so being able to have that maturity and that self-awareness of like, hey, I'm struggling. I know I need to meet this deadline. Can we get on the phone? Um, it's like I had an old manager that um he called me up out of the blue. Uh he's like, "Can we do that thing? What is it called? That thing where you're with somebody else, so body doubling?" He's like, "Yeah, body doubling." He's, "I have this deadline and I cannot, push through with it." And I was like, "Sure, man, just share your screen and like do my thing." And he had asked if he could have half a day of my time. And 30 minutes into it, he's like, "Dude, I'm done." And it was so fun to see that because he's not someone who normally will ask for help.
Yeah.
And for him to like take that step back and say, I need something different. And I've heard that this works. I want to try it. It was huge to see that work for him. And so if we can get over that kind of egotistical side of us, of I should be able to do this, I'm an adult, I I can do my thing. It's like, no, use the tools.
Yeah.
If you're really silly not to use something that works,
Is there any other kind of hacks that like for life in general that you find really useful that helps you?
there's a lot of just realizing that there's not one system that's going to be the thing. And so that would be my biggest hack is look around, pick up the pieces that work for you and be okay with it when they don't, but have like just look at it as like a tool belt where you're going to pick up different tools for different situations and and be willing to kind of swap those out, because that was one of the things that was really difficult for me through the years is I read so many self-help productivity books because this one was going to work. This one was going to be the perfect system. It works for millions of people.
Hmm.
And I would enjoy it for a little while and then I would just drop it off. And then I'd go through the shame spiral
Yeah.
of like, why does this work for millions of people, but not me? Like, why am I so horrible at life? So that would be, like I said, the biggest hack is becoming aware of what works, documenting it, and being okay with things when they don't, and just kind of going from there, uh, and embracing the different ways that your brain processes information, because it looks different for all of us, and what works for me may or may not work for you even though we both have ADHD.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't mean like you fit into this bucket, so everything's going to be the same with the results. So when we talked last time, I mentioned when I started posting about my ADHD journey on social media, uh, I mostly just told my story and some of the aspects of it, and I realized that I can't keep posting those like heart-wrenching emotional things all the time. It there's only
It's
so
so
many
easy
ways
to
you can
do, wouldn't
spin the
it?
same
Yeah.
story. Yeah,
Yeah.
and people will stop reading and or viewing. And since I'm trying to help other people realize like, hey, if you have these kind of things going on, you might want to take
About
a
this.
closer look. So I started posting about some of the ways that I've been more productive throughout my life. And it's funny because if you follow along, you'll see drastically different methods. And I'll talk about in my posts like, hey, this changed everything for me. This was amazing. And then the next day I talk about something else that changed it so much for me. And it's true. Like these are all things that I've tried and have adapted uh and at one point or another they've worked really well and I'll lean on it. Uh so but having said that made me think about uh when we were talking about masking and the first year after my diagnosis was I had a lot of ups and downs where I had a lot of emotional roller coaster things going on because the initial relief of like, oh, here's what's going on. And then when medicine was helping me, I started changing some of the patterns. But then there was all that grief of I went 40 years. I made all these mistakes. Like I had a whole list of people I wanted to go and apologize to for
Yeah.
those random things that I had done or ways that I had inadvertently hurt people because of like I lost interest and moved on, or maybe I react to strongly. Like I said, I don't yell at people in general, but I might have cut people out
Yeah.
because of those things. And there's a dark period after my diagnosis because of all that shame and guilt that was coming back and some anger at like what interactions I had had with adults in my life that were like just focus and
Yeah.
you just need to get over this. You just need to do this. But
Typically is
uh,
like you said earlier about obviously your brain at the best of times, it's those 2 a.m. kind of moments where you start thinking back, and I had the kind of same sort of period after I realized and started piecing it together. And even though it wasn't quite as late, that I realized it was still, I was what, 27, 28, and there was just so many things that I was kind of like, especially with the masking and the people pleasing to the noticing the rejection sensitivity, where I would have, I would have gone with maybe what someone else has said or what to do, because
mhm,
masking what I really felt, and all of that. There were so many moments that became clear, and I was like, that just makes so much sense.
mhm,
Like, why did I not do that? Why did I do this? But then kind of came a level of calm after that. Like, okay, that's all in the past. I can't do anything about
mhm.
that. So, but what I can do now with this information is going forward, what can I do to change this, and
Yep.
be aware of it. And I think, like you mentioned earlier about self-awareness, I think self-awareness obviously is key for anyone in life, but I think with ADHD specifically as well, is so much more valuable to recognize when you're having your difficult moments. Looking back as well, like really kind of impulsive moments as well, really struggle with that. And obviously there's a um figures out there that say people with ADHD are what 30-40% more likely to have an addiction to something than someone that's
Mhm,
neurotypical. And it is really hard. People do genuinely suffer with those,
mhm,
and people with ADHD as well are more prone to those. And it can be really hard if
mhm,
you're not very self-aware in those moments, or even don't realize you have ADHD, and while you feel so strongly to act on those impulses. You share so many fantastic tips that you can use in various situations as well. I think sharing that information is so valuable as well. So thank you for everything you're sharing, by the way, because
uh,
so many things that I've learned from you already that's helped me massively. I want to go back to, I know you mentioned at the start about your friends that had ADHD as well. Obviously, with the stigma that's like around the condition. Are you friends with ADHD? Are they quite open about it? Do they talk openly, or is there that negative stigma that comes with it, is it as big as in the US as it is in the UK as well?
So there's two people in particular that I reached out to that were coworkers at different places that um, they were very upfront with it right off the bat. Um, and which is one of the reasons why I thought to go to them. Because they're just like, hey, this is who I am, just so you know. And they'd come in, hey, I forgot my meds today, so it's gonna be a little wild, and they made it was quite lighthearted. But the stigma, it's interesting because for me, I didn't think too much negativity when I started realizing, oh, there's a name to what is going on. And I was I approached it more from a place of curiosity. And so when I made a post about it, um, it was on LinkedIn. I mentioned it in passing, like it wasn't even really the focus for me. But I had somebody reach out to me and say, "Can you please keep writing about that?" Uh, and I started having more and more of those experiences as I started writing it. It's interesting because I'm really into the stats and the numbers across the platforms. I geek out on it. I love a good spreadsheet,
Hmm.
and so I make all kind of crazy spreadsheets to go along with it. And but across the platforms, if you look at my engagement is primarily I think it's set pretty consistent across platforms, like 73% female and the rest male. But the people who reach out to me privately are male. It's generally people late 30s and up that are saying, "Man, I've learned so much from your posts. I've gone and gotten a diagnosis," or they have questions, and they'll tell me they don't interact with my posts because they don't want publicly people to see them interacting with it. So they'll reach out to me privately, either, through teams on at work. People I've never talked to in my life are reaching out to me like, "Hey man, I got to talk to you about the post that you had.
Crazy.
This was amazing." And um, on LinkedIn, I'll have random friend requests and like I'll cut.
Like me.
There's been so there's well, and yours is a little easier because you have ADHD podcast in yours. So I'm like, okay, there's something with ADHD, but people like I don't really have connections with, and we're not even in the same industries. And I'll like, do I accept it, or I'm about to get a sales pitch? But there's been a number of them that I'll accept it and they'll just message me like, "Man, I got to talk to you." It, so there is a stigma, especially with males. Um, I'd say late 30s and on, because primarily we were raised with you don't talk about mental health. That's for people who are crazy. Be a man. Like you are there to provide and be manly. So you don't talk about your feelings, you just do these things. So if you have struggles, you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
That's not allowed. And I think something that really helped me is I've been married for 20 years now. I My wife and I have a wonderful relationship and we've got beautiful kids that we all have great relationship. The economy is always crazy, so you can't say you're secure in your job, but I feel relatively secure in my job. So I was like, what do I have to lose? Like I'm a high performer at work. So if I'm talking about my ADHD and telling people how they can be more productive at work, my employer can't be upset about that. And so I was like, I don't really have anything to lose by being outspoken about it. And so that's why I try to make sure I add in some of the emotional side of it because I'm trying to help normalize. Um, I know plenty of women can benefit from the message and they've told me they do, and I'm grateful for it. But I really try to speak to the men that aren't allowed to to speak up about what they're feeling and those dark moments because nobody knew I was going through depression. 'Cause you don't talk about that.
No.
It's like you just need to suck it up. Like, okay, you don't know how to do that thing, go figure it out. And so I suffered in silence for so long because I had to man up. Um, but when I was able to put a name to things and started getting help, I was like, oh, shoot, I know I'm not alone. And I'm going to make sure other people know they're not alone. I can't even remember what the original question was. Oh, stigma. Yeah. So most of the stigma is for the older, but fortunately, younger generation seems like mental health is it, more than okay to talk about.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing a positive trend in that, but it's definitely still an issue with uh, working professionals um, because people who have ADHD are always late, can't meet deadlines, and are unprofessional because they forgot to put matching shoes on, and or whatever else makes it stand out and say, no, that's not what
Yeah, it
your
shouldn't
typical ADHD
define.
person is. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that is really important that, obviously people are reaching out to you privately, but I think it's really important as well we share more stories publicly as well. And like you say, understanding obviously with society, we still have a problem being completely open. Absolutely, because I think there's always that anxiety or that fear of how is this going to be perceived when I tell people this, when I put it on there for the first time, and which was when I started doing this podcast actually. I hadn't really openly discussed it to too many people, so I wasn't quite sure how it was going to be perceived. But I think the more that we can do to have these conversations and spread awareness of what it's really like with ADHD. But not only that, but show like yourself saying you're a high performer at work, showing that you can still thrive with ADHD. In a workplace, in life in general, like you say, you've got a beautiful family, a loving wife, 5 kids, secure job. I think that just shows that it's living proof that even though you have ADHD, doesn't mean that you're destined for the criminal justice system as it's kind of
Mhm.
painted out as the stigma of someone with ADHD is getting kicked out of school because they're always acting up or whatever like
Mhm.
that, and then end up either being an addict or getting arrested and getting in trouble with the police because I think that is just the general most unfortunately in society that is still the stigma, someone with ADHD. But I think someone like yourself is openly having the conversations and in your position showing that you can still perform as well. Yes, sometimes we might be a bit close to deadlines, and sometimes we might be 5 minutes late because we think that we can do a wash, hoover and everything else in like 5 minutes before we're supposed to leave the house in the morning. But yeah, so I think it's really, but I think it's really important that we keep having these conversations and normalize it as well, because
Yeah.
it's great. And the people that I've spoken to already, it's great to see that so many people are still managing to accomplish successful careers
Mhm.
and even run businesses, despite of their ADHD, because it can be a real strength at times as well.
Exactly. And I had the opportunity in October to do a presentation for work and about ADHD. And I just gave examples of like, hey, if you recognize these things as a leader, so many people don't realize what's going on in their life. And so you're not saying go out and diagnose anybody, but if you're seeing these characteristics, try these things to help them. And like having clear deadlines, using some more visuals when you're trying to explain something, and like having the follow-ups of don't just say, hey, get this done, give us a deadline, probably need to make it a tighter deadline than you really need. Because if I know I have until Friday, um,
I'll
and
leave it till late
I'm
Thursday.
right, right. Uh, and so like just being aware of those things. So a lot of my posts, I try to include something about like, hey, leaders, if you see these kind of things, like here are some things you can do to support. But the presentation I did at work, I was just trying to emphasize like we're not asking for accommodations most of the time. Like most of the things that we need are just small adjustments that aren't really inconvenient for anybody. And it's like everybody should send an agenda before the meeting. There should be a recap with responsibilities. That should be normal. That shouldn't isn't really an
It should be.
accommodation.
It should be.
Uh,
Yeah.
right. Um, and sitting down with somebody and just like in the body doubling situation, like when I helped that guy at work, I wasn't inconvenienced. I was still getting my work done, and he was able to get his work done. So, trying to show people that this isn't, hey, we have this disability. You have to do all these things to make it so life is easier for us. And it's more of, hey, here's some things that you can do to make things more productive and people be able to make you money. Like that's what it gets down to. And a lot of people don't realize that they have needs. So I try to speak to that as well. A lot of people don't, they just look at, well, this is what works for everybody else, so it should work for me. And not realizing that they probably need to approach problems a little differently than others. Um, is a lot of what trying to do, raising that awareness, um, taking it from debilitating to being able to focus on the strengths.
I appreciate your insights, sharing the productivity tips as well on what we can take away from this. And yeah, certainly if this can raise awareness or even just help one person out there, I think this our conversation is certainly doing its job. If this can help just one person out there recognize it or help them be able to start thriving in life, whether it's work or personal, then yeah, it will certainly go a long way. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure having you and talking to you, Tyler. And yeah, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun, and we'll have to chat some more. But